Buenas noches.
Dos sistemas diferentes.
There are two different systems.
Políticas en cada aspecto diferente.
Different aspects.
Son diferentes, por ejemplo, la relación entre Canadá y Estados Unidos.
The relations between Canada and the United States are different from the relations between Cuba and the United States.
No es un obstáculo ni ha sido un obstáculo.
But it has not been an obstacle, and it is not an obstacle.
Nosotros comprendemos.
We understand and we respect
las posiciones políticas.
The political positions.
Y la política exterior.
And the foreign policy of Canada.
Sinceramente.
Sincerely.
Wherever the two men went throughout the island, the crowds flocked to Castro, and Trudeau was obviously awed by his political style.
A1, all kinds of superlatives. I had never seen a charismatic leader before. Now I know what it is. I was really impressed with the intensity of the links that he creates with the people he is either talking to in large numbers or talking to in small groups or even individually. He has a very, very intense and, I would say, positive rapport with people.
Castro's magnetism clearly holds the revolution and the society together, and one wonders what will happen in this autocratic society when he is gone. He is surrounded by nervous bodyguards who gave the Canadian press a rough time. The Cubans explained it was because the Americans tried to assassinate him. The Americans, in turn, were apparently uneasy about Trudeau's visit.
There's a certain disquiet, I think, in the State Department, watching Trudeau, seeing that his sympathies often lie with the very groups that the official U.S. policy finds it difficult to accommodate.
So official U.S. policy has changed?
I don't know that, I wouldn't say that the U.S. policy toward Canada's entry into the OAS has changed, but there's a nuance of difference there which might be worth pursuing.
Do you think that Trudeau on this visit was making it easier for the United States to follow up and re-establish relations with Cuba?
The impression that you get all over this town, and certainly in the State Department, is that the issue of U.S.-Cuban relations is dead for this administration.
I believe that there is a view in the U.S. government that Canadian efforts in Cuba could be useful to preparing the way for some reconciliation between Cuba and the United States. The unfortunate thing, of course, is that this Cuban involvement in Angola has considerably diverted any tendency toward reconciliation for the time being.
Havana was once the Sin City of the Caribbean, where American tourists came by the thousands. It had more prostitutes than any other city in the world. Today, there are no more prostitutes and no Americans. But there are thousands of Canadian tourists. The Canadians come for a cheap holiday in the sun. They lie by the swimming pools, completely unconcerned that they are in a communist country. The Cubans love it. It brings them thousands of dollars. The tourist dollars deposited in Cuba are not lost to Canada. They are used to buy Canadian products, such as locomotives, to replace the antiquated steam engines still used on the island. So desperate is the Cuban government to get its hands on Western technology that it exports food while rationing its own people. By Canadian standards, the supermarkets are drab and have very little selection of foodstuffs. Nearly all the basic necessities are rationed. Castro, again to demonstrate his independence from Russia, is anxious to establish access to North American technology, and the Canadians are eager to respond. In 1974, Canada was Cuba's third most important supplier, and Canadian cows which produce this milk are an important part of that trade. Castro and his brother Ramon, who is an even more flamboyant figure than Fidel, showed Trudeau around a cattle breeding plant where Canadian Holsteins are crossed with native cattle. In a speech, Castro said, everywhere you looked on his island, you could see a Canadian cow. Apparently they worked very well, unlike a British fertilizer plant he bought, which he said was useless. Cuba's economy is based on sugar, and they want to sell more to Canada. But Castro is not only fighting South Africans in Angola, he's fighting them on the world sugar market.
Cubans wanted to buy Canadian goods. They wanted dollars to pay for it. They wanted in exchange to sell us sugar. But they couldn't compete with South Africa, which had a preferential tariff going back to 1931. And I find this paradoxical because on the one hand you have Canada participating in the not exclusion but stimulating the withdrawal of South Africa from the Commonwealth, and at the other hand allowing South Africa to continue to have Commonwealth preference. Cubans really want to compete on equal terms with South Africa, and the one major commodity they can sell us is sugar.
Pierre and Margaret Trudeau's departure from Cuba was an emotional event. The close personal involvement that had developed between them and Castro was obvious. Margaret carried her baby Michel around to many places in Cuba, and Fidel even said goodbye to him.
Well, you never take so many pictures when I'm holding them.
Margaret appeared to be happier in Cuba than on any other part of the tour. It seemed to be the lack of formality she enjoyed. In Mexico and later in Venezuela, she broke through protocol at formal dinners to propose her own toasts. In Caracas, she startled dinner guests by singing a song. Also in Caracas, Pierre Trudeau defended his decision to go to Cuba.
Well, you know, ask, 40,000 Canadian tourists, and I suppose very soon 100,000 Canadian tourists, why they're going to Cuba. Good place to go.
But you know the context. People are saying, you said in answer to a previous question a few nights ago, I think it was in Cuba, that you went to China, you went to Russia, nobody complained. But obviously the timing is different now because of whatever this noise is about the new society at home. People see you going to Cuba. I realize it's awfully irrational, a lot of it, but it's there.
Well, President Perez last night lauded our new society. He is in the third world. He sees the very strong force coming out of Africa, out of Latin America, out of the Arab countries, out of Asian countries. He says, thank goodness there is an industrialized, advanced society like Canada who understands our point of view. And I'm sure businessmen here will, or more particularly businessmen in Cuba, will not share the apprehensions that some have. You know, you have to remind yourself, after all, that it was a conservative government that decided to stick with Castro after the revolution, to stick with Castro in spite of the missile crisis, to stick with Castro after his government, and liberals have gone along with the conservatives with this. I'm not saying this in order just to tease Mr. Diefenbaker, because it is indicative of Canadians' desire to maintain an independent foreign policy. There's something for us in trading with Cuba.